A lonely guard despairs when he finds a baby not breathing, abandoned under the bridge. John was a man marked by time, a lonely guard who spent his days in the shadow of an old bridge. His life had changed drastically after the death of his beloved wife, Mary. They had shared a lifetime of love and companionship, and her absence left an unfillable void. The bridge John guarded was more than just a crossing point. It was a monument to his pain and loneliness. Each stone seemed to carry the weight of his memories. He walked back and forth, watching the constant flow of water below, lost in thought. John had a daughter, Emma, but since Mary's death, he had distanced himself from her. The pain of looking at Emma, who reminded him so much of her mother, was unbearable. He isolated himself, immersing himself in his work as a bridge guard to escape his emotions. His nights were long and lonely, filled only with the distant sound of cars and the constant murmur of the river. His routine was a desperate attempt to keep life in order, but the truth was that John was adrift, directionless. He had no friends, avoided social places, and shunned any contact that might remind him of his loss. Each dawn brought a new opportunity to face his pain, but he avoided it, taking refuge in solitude. Even amid this darkness, there was a spark of hope, a small flame that still burned within John. Something he barely recognized himself, but was about to be awakened in a way he could never imagine. The bridge John guarded was not just a structure of stone and metal. It was a portal to the past. Built over a century ago, it had witnessed countless stories, and now, it witnessed John's lonely life. The old guard spent his days patrolling the bridge with a keen eye, always waiting for anything out of the ordinary. It was as if each step he took was a way to pay homage to those who had crossed before. The inhabitants of the small town saw John as a mysterious figure. They watched him from a distance, noting his slow and thoughtful walk, his face marked by the wrinkles of time and the sadness of unbearable loss. Although many felt sorry for him, few dared to approach. John, for his part, kept a calculated distance, preferring the company of silence and the sound of the wind crossing the bridge's beams. That morning, the fog embraced the bridge like a mysterious veil. John, true to his routine, walked the usual path with his mind immersed in memories and reflections. The distant sound of the river and the echo of his own steps were his only companions. Then he noticed something out of the ordinary, a restlessness that made him stop and look around more attentively. As he approached the center of the bridge, something caught his eye below, near the support beams. It was hard to see clearly through the fog, but there was movement, a sign that something was out of place. John descended carefully, his senses on alert. As he got closer, his heart began to beat faster. There, partially hidden among the shadows, was a small cradle. The shock took hold of him. It was not something he expected to find in his quiet watch. John approached the cradle cautiously. Inside, there was a baby, motionless, silent. Despair hit John with full force. He was not a man trained for emergencies, but the sight of that small life in danger awakened an almost instinctive urgency in him. Kneeling beside the cradle, he extended his trembling hands, feeling the child's fragile presence. He looked around, hoping to see someone, anyone who could explain what was happening, but there was no one. The baby was alone, abandoned. John felt a lump form in his throat. There was no time to lose. Vague memories of resuscitation techniques he had learned many years ago began to surface in his mind. He prepared to act, determined not to let that child die there, under his watch. With care and concentration, John began to apply the resuscitation techniques. Time seemed to stretch, each second an eternity as he tried to bring the baby back to life. His hands worked mechanically, but his mind was filled with silent prayers. And then, finally, a fragile breath escaped the child's small lips, followed by a weak, but audible cry. The emotion that overtook John was overwhelming. He felt a wave of relief and gratitude flood his being. The baby was alive. The lonely guard, who had spent years trapped in his own sorrow, now found himself responsible for a new life. Holding the child in his arms, he promised himself that he would care for it until he found its parents, no matter how long it took. At that moment, under the bridge, a new journey began for John and the little baby he had just saved. John held the baby in his arms, the weight of responsibility and the newly witnessed miracle still reverberating in his heart. The despair that initially gripped him upon finding the child not breathing slowly transformed into renewed hope. The fragile cry of the baby was a sound of life, a sound that seemed to echo in every fiber of his being, bringing him back to the light after years in the darkness. For a long time, loneliness had been John's constant companion. After Mary's death, he isolated himself, immersing in a mechanical routine that kept him away from painful emotions. But now, with the baby in his arms, something began to change. The emptiness inside him was being filled with a sense of purpose, a flame of hope that he thought had extinguished forever. On the way to his small cabin, John felt the baby warm against his chest. Each step was a reminder of the new role he was assuming, not just as a lonely guard, but as a protector, perhaps even a father. He entered the cabin, the warmth inside contrasting with the cold morning fog. Gently, he placed the baby in an improvised bed, covering it with a soft blanket. The crying ceased, giving way to peaceful breathing that filled John's heart with a peace he hadn't felt in years. As he looked at the sleeping child, memories of his own daughter, Emma, flooded his mind. He had distanced himself from her, unable to deal with the pain of losing Mary. But now, with this baby before him, John felt a second chance unfolding. He realized that there was still an opportunity for redemption, a chance to reconnect with the emotions and relationships he had avoided for so long. The morning after rescuing the baby, John woke up with a different feeling, an energy he hadn't felt in a long time. The baby slept peacefully beside his makeshift bed, and John realized that the little life he had saved had irreversibly changed his own life. As he prepared a simple coffee, he found himself smiling, a gesture that had become rare in recent years. John's routine, once lonely and mechanical, gained new colors and meanings. He now had someone who depended on him, a responsibility that gave him a new purpose. Each morning began with caring for the baby, whom he started calling Lucas. The name seemed fitting for that small light that had entered his life. Feeding Lucas, changing his diapers, and soothing him became tasks that John carried out with a dedication he didn't know he still possessed. While caring for Lucas, John began to reflect on his own life. The bridge, which had always been a symbol of his loneliness and pain, now represented the connection between him and Lucas, an unexpected bond that emerged in the darkness. The beams and pillars of the bridge seemed less heavy, and the sound of the river below was now a gentle melody that cradled his thoughts. John also began to step out of his isolated routine. He made visits to the town doctor to ensure Lucas was healthy, and these visits forced him to interact more with the other residents. The people, once distant, now looked at John with a mixture of curiosity and respect. He was changing, and the town noticed. The interactions, though brief, were enough to rekindle in John a sense of community and belonging. Days turned into weeks, and John realized he was not just surviving, he was living again. Lucas brought a vitality to his life that he thought was lost forever. With each smile from the baby, with each laugh, John felt his own soul warm. He began to plan for the future, not just for Lucas, but for himself. The search for the boy's parents continued, but now there was a feeling of hope and purpose guiding his actions. John also began to reflect on his relationship with his daughter Emma. The emotional distance he had imposed between them seemed less justified now. Caring for Lucas awakened in him a deeper understanding of the importance of family ties. He found himself writing letters to Emma, trying to find the right words to explain his absence and perhaps seek reconciliation. Determined to find Lucas's parents, John embarked on a journey that took him to places and people he never imagined. With the baby in his arms, he started in the town, talking to the residents, asking if anyone had seen anything unusual or knew of a family that might be looking for a child. The responses were always the same: looks of surprise, followed by heads shaking in denial. John did not give up. He went to the local police station and reported the case to the sheriff, who promised to help. They placed ads in newspapers and spread posters all over town. John spent hours on the phone, calling orphanages, hospitals, and even churches in neighboring towns. Each call that ended without a response was a small defeat, but he refused to give up. The determination to find Lucas's parents was stronger than any obstacle. He walked the streets, talking to strangers, visiting community gathering places, and even stopping in cafes and markets, always with the hope that someone would recognize the baby. The people, moved by the poignant story of the lonely guard and the found baby, helped as best they could. But the clues were few and inconclusive. Each day seemed a repetition of the previous one, an endless search that always ended in dead ends. John expanded his search, traveling to nearby towns, repeating the same exhaustive process of asking and looking. In each new town, he felt renewed hope, only to be replaced by the frustration of another day without answers. Baby Lucas, unaware of everything, continued to grow and develop under John's loving care, who began to question if he would ever find the boy's parents. Winter arrived, bringing long, cold nights. John, who was never one to be discouraged by adversity, found strength in Lucas's company. The boy's laughter and constant presence were a reminder that he was not alone. Despite numerous failed attempts, John felt less lonely. Lucas became an anchor, keeping him steady and hopeful. John's life began to take on a different rhythm since Lucas entered his world. Mornings were filled with children's laughter, and nights with the tranquility of a sleeping child. One afternoon, while John watched Lucas play with an old wooden toy, the idea of baptizing the baby began to form. He remembered a conversation he had with Mary many years ago, when they were expecting Emma. They discussed various names, thinking about the future and the meaning of each one. A name Mary loved was Lucas, a strong name, meaning bearer of light. John never forgot that conversation, and now seemed the right time to bring up that special name. With a heart full of emotion, John decided it was time to baptize the baby. The next day, he went to the town reverend to officiate Lucas's baptism. Little Lucas, dressed in the best clothes John could find, seemed radiant. Upon arriving at the church, the reverend greeted them with a warm smile. He had known John for many years and was moved upon hearing the story of the baby found under the bridge. With affection, he agreed to perform the ceremony, seeing it as a symbol of hope and renewal. The ceremony was simple but full of meaning. Only a few people were present, but the small group felt the depth of the moment. The reverend spoke about the importance of the name, the meaning of Lucas, and how that name now carried the story of a miraculously saved boy and a man who found a new purpose through love and compassion. When the holy water touched Lucas's forehead, John felt a wave of emotions: joy, sadness, gratitude, and above all, hope. After the baptism, John and Lucas returned home, where a small celebration awaited them. Some neighbors who had heard about the ceremony brought cakes and gifts. It was a simple gesture, but for John, it meant the world. He felt that, little by little, he was rebuilding his life, piece by piece. Lucas was growing up surrounded by love and care, something John was determined to provide, no matter the difficulties. Days passed, and John and Lucas became more and more inseparable. The loneliness that once dominated John's life was replaced by laughter and moments of tenderness he never expected to experience again. The small cabin, which once seemed like a mausoleum of sad memories, now vibrated with Lucas's energy and joy. Each morning, John woke up to the cheerful voice of Lucas, who had already made the house his kingdom of play and discovery. John prepared coffee while Lucas, with his big, curious eyes, explored every corner of the house. The old guard loved watching Lucas's reactions as he discovered something new. The boy's bright eyes were a beacon of hope and vitality. John began to teach him simple things, like the names of the trees around the cabin, the colors of the birds flying by the river, and even some old stories about the bridge he guarded. Lucas absorbed everything like a sponge, asking endless questions that John answered with patience and care. Each question from Lucas was an open door to a new world of learning and conexiones. Afternoons were dedicated to walks along the riverbanks and the bridge. John showed Lucas how to observe the flow of the water and listen to the sound of the wind crossing the bridge's beams. They threw stones into the water, counting how many skips they could get before sinking. These simple but profoundly meaningful moments built a solid foundation of love and trust between them. At night after dinner, John read stories to Lucas by the light of an old lantern. The stories varied between fantastic adventures and tales of friendship, always carefully chosen to convey valuable lessons. Lucas, nestled in John's lap, listened attentively, his big, bright eyes fixed on the old guard's face. These nighttime hours were the time of greatest connection between the two, a sacred time of affection and learning. John found himself smiling more, laughing more, feeling a lightness in his heart that he hadn't experienced in a long time. He realized that Lucas was healing his wounds, filling the empty spaces left by Mary's loss and the distance from Emma. In Lucas, John found a new reason to live, a purpose that went beyond guarding the old bridge. The boy was not just a companion, but a source of renewal and hope. Years passed quickly, like leaves carried by the wind. John and Lucas lived a life full of precious moments, even as the search for Lucas's parents continued without success. Each day was a new adventure, a new opportunity to strengthen the bonds that united them. During these 6 years, Lucas grew from a fragile baby to a boy full of energy and curiosity. He became John's joy, a constant source of laughter and discoveries. The small cabin transformed into a vibrant home, echoing with Lucas's games and dreams. John, who was once a lonely guard, was now a dedicated and loving father, finding joy in the simple things in life. John never gave up looking for Lucas's parents. He continued his tireless search, placing ads in newspapers, talking to authorities, and visiting neighboring towns. But each attempt ended in frustration. Lucas's parents remained a mystery, like shadows disappearing in the fog. Even so, John kept hope alive, believing that one day he would find answers. Despite the lack of news about Lucas's parents, life in the cabin was rich and full of meaningful experiences. John taught Lucas to fish in the nearby river, to build small wooden boats, and to appreciate the nature around them. They spent hours together, exploring the riverbanks, watching the birds, and sharing stories. Each day was a new life lesson, a new memory to be cherished. Lucas also started attending the local school. He was a brilliant student, always curious and eager to learn. His teachers quickly noticed his intelligence and dedication, and Lucas excelled in several subjects. John, proud of his achievements, attended all school meetings and events, always encouraging Lucas to pursue his dreams. With each passing year, Lucas became more independent, but never strayed from John. They shared everything: joys, sorrows, challenges, and triumphs. The relationship between them strengthened over time, built on a foundation of love and mutual respect. Lucas knew that John was not his biological father, but to him, John was more than a father. He was a hero, a guide, and a friend. During these 6 years, John's health began to decline slowly. He felt the weight of the years and the hard work life had imposed on him. However, he never let it stop him from taking care of Lucas. Even on the hardest days, John found the strength to be present, to support and love the boy who'd become the center of his life. The winters were especially harsh, bringing long and cold nights. John and Lucas faced these adversities together, finding warmth in each other's company. The stories told by the fireplace, the games in the snow, and the starry nights became unforgettable memories. Each winter was a test of endurance and love, and together, they always found a way to overcome it. The community around them also recognized the transformation in John. The small-town residents, who once saw John as a solitary figure, now admired him for his dedication and love for Lucas. They offered help whenever they could, creating a support network that made John and Lucas's life lighter and full of solidarity. Lucas grew increasingly inspired by John, his guide and mentor. The lessons of kindness and compassion that John taught him daily began to shape the young boy's heart. Among all the things Lucas learned, the most valuable was the importance of caring for the most vulnerable, a lesson he soon put into practice in surprising ways. That spring, the cabin and its surroundings became a refuge for various forest animals. Lucas, with his keen eyes and generous heart, dedicated himself to observing and helping the small creatures he found. He spent hours by the riverbanks, where he often found animals in need. Inspired by John's dedication, Lucas began to act as a true protector of nature. One morning, while exploring the forest, Lucas heard a faint, desperate sound coming from a nearby bush. Approaching carefully, he found a small rabbit, trapped in a snare. The animal trembled with fear and pain, and Lucas felt his heart tighten. With delicate hands, he freed the rabbit, carrying it carefully back to the cabin. John, seeing the scene, felt immense pride. Together, they cared for the rabbit until it was healthy enough to return to the forest. But this was just the first of many heroic actions by Lucas. He seemed to have a special talent for finding animals in need. One afternoon, during a violent storm, Lucas spotted a baby bird fallen from its nest. Soaked and helpless, the small bird was at the mercy of the elements. Lucas, without thinking twice, ran to rescue it. He took it home, where he cared for it with patience and love. Following John's advice on how to treat a fragile animal, the bird, which Lucas named Hope, soon became a temporary but beloved part of the family. Every day Lucas fed Hope, encouraging it to flap its wings again. When the day finally came to return the bird to nature, John and Lucas walked together to the forest. With a smile and a tear of farewell, Lucas launched Hope into the air, watching with joy as it flew to freedom. Lucas's deeds did not go unnoticed in the community. Stories of his actions began to spread, and the boy earned the affectionate nickname, the Little Hero. People from the town came to the cabin for advice or help with injured animals. John, seeing the positive impact Lucas was having, felt more fulfilled than ever. He knew that the seeds of compassion and courage he had planted in Lucas's heart were blooming magnificently. The sun shone high in the sky, promising another peaceful day in the small cabin near the bridge. John and Lucas, as usual, started the morning with their daily tasks. Lucas was especially excited because they planned to spend the afternoon fishing in the river. John, though slower and with some aches here and there, never failed to accompany the boy on his adventures. Life seemed good and full, filled with shared moments. That day, however, fate had other plans. John needed to make some repairs on the bridge, something he had always done with skill and care. The old structure required constant maintenance, and John, with his experience, knew exactly what to do. He asked Lucas to stay in the cabin, promising to return soon. Lucas, with his independent spirit, agreed, planning surprises for his father's return. While John worked, focused on adjusting a loose beam, a fateful slip occurred. One of the wooden planks he was standing on gave way, and in an instant, John lost his balance. The world seemed to spin in slow motion as he fell, hitting the ground below violently. The pain was immediate and intense, radiating from his leg and spreading through his body. He tried to get up, but a sharp pang stopped him. His leg was severely injured. John, a man accustomed to dealing with solitude, now found himself in a desperate situation. He called for help, his voice echoing through the empty bridge and along the river. But there was no one around to hear. The weight of the situation began to sink in. He was alone, hurt, and unable to move. The sun shone mercilessly, and time seemed to stand still. Meanwhile, in the cabin, Lucas felt a growing unease. John should have been back by now. Determined to check, he headed towards the bridge, his quick steps reflecting his concern. As he approached, he heard his father's groans of pain. Lucas's heart raced. He ran and found John lying down, the expression of pain on the old guard's face. "Dad!" Lucas shouted, kneeling beside John. "What happened?" John, breathing heavily, managed to say, "I fell. Hurt my leg. Lucas, I need help." Without hesitation, Lucas made a decision. He knew he had to act quickly. "I'll get help, Dad. Hold on." Lucas ran back to the cabin, grabbed a blanket, and quickly returned to cover John, trying to keep him warm and comfortable. He looked into John's eyes, trying to convey the strength and courage his father had always taught him. Then, Lucas ran along the dusty road to town, his feet barely touching the ground. He ran like never before, motivated by love and the urgency to save John. The distance seemed endless, but Lucas did not stop, ignoring the pain in his own muscles. Upon reaching the town, he went straight to the police station. "My father, he's hurt, we need help." The words came out breathless but clear. The sheriff, recognizing the desperation on Lucas's face, immediately gathered a rescue team. Back at the bridge, John struggled to stay conscious. He knew Lucas was strong and intelligent, but time seemed an implacable barrier. Each passing minute was an eternity of pain and worry. He remembered the moments spent with Lucas, the laughter, the stories told by the fireplace, and clung to those memories like an anchor. Finally, the sound of voices and hurried footsteps broke the silence. Lucas returned with the sheriff and some residents, all ready to help. With care and skill, they lifted John and carried him to the cabin, where they could better assess his injuries. The way back was slow and cautious, but Lucas never let go of John's hand, staying by his side the entire time. At the cabin, the town doctor arrived quickly, examining John's leg. "It's broken," he said in a grave but reassuring tone. "We need to immobilize it and take you to the hospital." Lucas watched everything, the worry evident on his face. John, despite the pain, smiled at his son. "You were brave, Lucas, a true hero." Lucas held John's hand tightly, tears shining in his eyes. "I just did what you taught me, Dad. Stay together and never give up." The trip to the hospital was tense, but John was in good hands. Lucas held his hand the whole way, his eyes fixed on his father, trying to convey courage. John, despite the pain, felt immensely proud of his son. Upon arriving at the hospital, the medical team acted quickly, taking John to the examination room. Lucas, anxious, waited in the waiting room, his heart beating fast. After a few hours, a doctor came to Lucas. "Your father will be fine," he said with a reassuring smile. "The leg is broken, but with proper treatment and plenty of rest, he will recover fully." Lucas let out a sigh of relief, thanking the doctor. When he finally saw John, he was lying in a bed, his leg in a cast and suspended. John smiled when he saw Lucas enter the room, and Lucas ran to him, hugging him carefully. "Dad, I was so worried," said Lucas, his eyes shining with tears. "I know, son, but you were amazing. Now we need to focus on my recovery," John replied, stroking Lucas's hair. The following days were a true test of patience and strength for both. John was discharged from the hospital with clear instructions. He needed a lot of rest and should avoid putting any weight on his leg. Lucas, determined to take care of his father, took on the responsibility of helping him recover. Back at the cabin, Lucas transformed into a little nurse. He organized the house to facilitate John's mobility, ensuring everything was within reach. Each morning began with Lucas helping John get up and move safely. He prepared breakfast and served it with a smile, doing everything possible to keep his father's spirits high. "Thank you, son," John said, increasingly impressed with Lucas's dedication. "You are taking care of me like a true hero." Lucas also took care of the household chores. He learned to cook simple dishes, often improvising recipes with what they had on hand. The meals, though modest, were prepared with love and care. John watched with admiration as Lucas managed everything, from cleaning the house to feeding the animals around. The nights were a special time for both. Lucas read to John, choosing stories that his father liked. Sitting beside the bed, he read with a calm and engaging voice, creating a cozy and peaceful environment. These reading sessions not only helped John relax but also strengthened the bond between them. John loved hearing Lucas's voice, which always brought an indescribable comfort. Winter brought additional challenges. The nights were cold and the cabin needed constant heating. Lucas, always vigilant, kept the fireplace lit and ensured John was always comfortable. He also took care of Max, the faithful dog, who now spent more time inside the cabin offering company and warmth. Lucas became a pillar of strength and resilience. Even in the most difficult moments, he never lost hope or determination. His dedication and unconditional love were a beacon that guided John through the recovery process. John, touched by Lucas's compassion and maturity, felt more motivated to recover fully. As the weeks passed, Lucas's efforts began to bear fruit. John gained strength and mobility, managing to take small steps with the help of crutches. Each achievement was celebrated with joy, and Lucas never stopped encouraging and supporting his father. The recovery process was slow, but the constant progress brought hope. Finally, spring began to dawn, bringing new breath to life in the cabin. John, now able to move more easily, thanked daily for the love and care Lucas had given him. Lucas, in turn, felt more confident and accomplished. He had faced a huge challenge and proved to himself and John that love and dedication could overcome any obstacle. Summer arrived with its vibrant colors and long days, and life seemed to return to normal for John and Lucas. John's recovery was almost complete, thanks to Lucas's tireless care. The two resumed their daily activities, enjoying every moment together. But fate had one more surprise in store for them. One afternoon, while Lucas played near the bridge and John did his usual rounds, an unfamiliar car stopped near the cabin's entrance. From inside, a couple got out, looking around with expressions of anxiety and hope. John, with his keen eye, noticed the arrival of the visitors and walked toward them, feeling a tightness in his heart. "Can I help you?" John asked, trying to hide his curiosity and apprehension. "We're looking for a man named John," said the man, his voice filled with emotion. "My name is David, and this is my wife, Clara. We've been searching for our lost son for many years, and recently received a lead that brought us here." John felt the world around him sway. Could it be true? He looked at Lucas, who was now approaching with curiosity in his eyes. "Lucas," John called softly. "Come here, son." Lucas ran to John, stopping beside him. Clara's eyes filled with instant tears upon seeing the boy. "Lucas," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. David stepped forward, his hand trembling as he extended it. "Is that the name you gave him?" John nodded, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. "Yes, he is my son Lucas. I found him 6 years ago, abandoned under this bridge. I tried to find his parents, but never had any success." Clara began to cry, unable to contain her emotions. "His real name is Gabriel?" she said between sobs. "We called him Gabriel. We had to leave him for reasons you couldn't imagine. It was the most painful decision of our lives." Lucas, confused and anxious, looked at John for answers. "Dad, who are these people?" John knelt beside Lucas, holding his small hands. "These people are your biological parents, Lucas. They loved you and searched for you for a long time." David approached, his voice firm but gentle. "Lucas, or Gabriel, if you allow us, we would like to tell our story. We want you to understand why we had to leave you." Lucas looked at John, who nodded encouragingly. They headed to the cabin where they sat around the table. Clara, still holding her son's hand, began to tell the story they had carried in their hearts for all those years. Gabriel was born at a very difficult time in our lives, Clara began. We were being pursued by dangerous people, and our lives were at risk. We had no choice but to hide Gabriel in a place where we knew he would be safe. The bridge seemed the only safe refuge that desperate night. Leaving him there was the hardest thing we've ever done. David continued, his voice choked with emotion. We tried to go back for him, but it was too dangerous. It took years to free ourselves from the people threatening us. Since then, our search for him never stopped. We did everything we could to find him, and when we heard about a boy found by a guard near this bridge, we knew we had to come. John looked at Lucas, who was absorbing every word. Lucas, these are your parents. They loved you and searched for you with all the strength they had. Lucas, with tears in his eyes, stood up and hugged Clara and David. I am Lucas now, but I'm happy to know I am Gabriel to you. I want to learn more about you and understand everything that happened. David and Clara shared more about their lives and their struggle to reunite with their son. Lucas, still processing everything, felt a growing connection with his biological parents. He also knew that John would always be his father, the man who raised him and loved him unconditionally. It was 6 years ago, David began, his voice trembling. We were living a quiet life, but everything changed suddenly. I worked for a company that, without my knowledge, was involved in illegal activities. When I found out, I tried to report it, but it put us in great danger. Clara squeezed her husband's hand, her eyes filled with tears. They came after us. Dangerous men without scruples. We had nowhere to run, and we knew our lives were at risk. Gabriel was just a baby. So helpless. David continued, his voice choked. One night we were ambushed. We barely escaped, but we knew they wouldn't give up easily. Our only thought was to protect Gabriel. We couldn't let him be caught by those terrible people. Clara's eyes filled with tears as she remembered the painful decision. We decided to hide him in a place where we knew he would be found and cared for. The bridge seemed safe. Leaving him there was the hardest thing we've ever done in our lives. We spent years running, always looking over our shoulders, our hearts broken by the absence of our son. David paused, trying to regain his composure. Finally, we gathered enough evidence to dismantle the organization and imprison its leaders. It took a long time, but we ensured our safety and finally had the chance to look for Gabriel. We never stopped thinking about him, imagining how he was. Lucas looked at his biological parents, absorbing every word. He could hardly believe the story he was hearing. His young mind tried to process the gravity of the sacrifice his parents had made to protect him. Clara approached Lucas, hesitant, with tears rolling down her face. We never wanted to abandon you, dear. It was a terrible decision, but necessary to ensure your safety. All these years we dreamed of the day we could hold you in our arms again. The little Gabriel, now known as Lucas, felt a whirlwind of emotions. He looked at John, who had raised him with so much love and care, and then at David and Clara, who had risked everything to protect him. The dilemma in his heart was evident, but one thing was certain. He was deeply loved by all. The room was filled with palpable tension. Lucas's big, confused eyes moved between John and his biological parents, David and Clara. His parents' words still echoed in his mind, the story of danger and sacrifice they had shared. David, with a voice still hoarse with emotion, extended his hand to the boy. Lucas, or Gabriel, whichever you prefer, we want you to come live with us. We are finally safe, and we can be a family again. Lucas tightened his grip on John's hand, his father since he could remember. John, with eyes full of love and sadness, smiled at the boy, trying to convey strength. Lucas, my dear, this is an important decision. You need to do what you think is right for you. The boy looked at Clara, whose tears had not yet dried. Dear, we never wanted to leave you. Our hearts were always with you. We dreamed of the day we could be a family again. But we know you loved John, and that doesn't change anything." Lucas felt a knot form in his throat. How could he choose between the two families he loved? John had been his safe harbor, his protector, and friend. But David and Clara were his biological parents, who loved him so much they were willing to sacrifice everything for him. I don't know what to do," Lucas said, his voice small and trembling. John knelt beside the boy, looking him in the eyes. "Lucas, you will always be my son, no matter what happens. I just want you to be happy. If you decide to go with your parents, I will understand." Lucas looked at John's aging face, each wrinkle telling a story of sacrifice and love. He knew that John had also suffered losses and that somehow he had filled a void in the old guard's heart. David took a step forward, kneeling beside John. "We know this is difficult, son, and whatever your decision, we will respect it. But we want you to know that our home will always be open to you. We love you, and always have her." Clara approached, gently caressing Lucas's face. "You are our miracle, Gabriel. We left you once to protect you, but now we want to be by your side if you allow us." Lucas's heart was divided. He wanted to be with his biological parents, learn more about his roots and the life they could provide. But the thought of leaving John alone, without the company they had built together over the years, was too painful. "I need time," Lucas murmured, his eyes filled with tears. "I need to think." David and Clara nodded, understanding the depth of the boy's anguish. John, with a sad smile, pulled Lucas into a tight hug. "Of course, my boy. Take all the time you need." As night fell over the small house, Lucas sat with John, feeling the familiar comfort. He knew that no matter what decision he made, he would be loved. But at that moment, the doubt in his heart seemed unbearable, and he could only hope that time would bring him the clarity he so desperately desired. The sky was tinged with shades of pink and orange when John decided to take a walk to town, an old habit he had resumed to clear his mind. Lucas's doubt and anxiety seemed to reflect in him, and he needed a moment to think about everything that was happening. As he walked through the busy streets, lost in his thoughts, John spotted a small bookstore. Something drew him inside, perhaps a vague memory of when he used to read stories to Emma, his daughter, before she grew up and drifted away. Inside the bookstore, he was leafing through books absent-mindedly when he heard a familiar voice. "Dad?" The word sounded hesitant, almost incredulous. John turned slowly, his heart racing. There, standing before him, was Emma, his daughter, whom he hadn't seen in years. Her eyes were wide, filled with surprise and suppressed emotion. "Emma," John whispered, his voice faltering. They stared at each other for a moment that seemed like an eternity. Then, as if moved by an irresistible impulse, they ran to each other and embraced, tears rolling freely. "Dad, I thought I'd never see you again," Emma said between sobs. "I was so afraid to look for you, afraid that you wouldn't want to see me." John hugged her tighter, feeling the weight of the years of separation dissipate. "Oh, my dear, I always wanted to see you. I missed you so much. I was just lost." They pulled back slightly, still holding each other's hands. Emma smiled, wiping away her tears. "There's someone I want you to meet." She led him to the back of the bookstore, where a tall, gentle-looking man stood, holding the hands of two adorable children. "Dad, this is my husband, Michael, and these are your grandchildren, Sophie and Leo." John looked at Michael, who extended his hand with a warm smile. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, sir. Emma talks a lot about you." John shook Michael's hand, feeling a little embarrassed but deeply moved. "The pleasure is mine, Michael, and please call me John." He then crouched down to be at the height of his grandchildren. "Hi, Sophie. Hi, Leo. I'm Grandpa John." The children smiled shyly before running to hug him. John felt his heart fill with joy, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He looked at Emma, his eyes conveying everything words couldn't express. Later, they sat in a nearby cafe, sharing stories and catching up on lost time. Emma talked about her life, how she always wanted to reconcile but didn't know how. John talked about Lucas and the deep bond he had formed with the boy. "You need to meet him," John said. "He's an amazing boy, and I think he'd love to meet you all." Emma nodded, her eyes shining with excitement. "We'd love to, Dad. Let's do it." As the sun set, John felt a new dawn in his life. The reconciliation with Emma, meeting his son-in-law and grandchildren, was a miracle he had never expected. And now, with Lucas by his side, he felt that despite all the difficulties, his life was complete. When they returned to John's house, Lucas ran to the door, curious about the unexpected visitors. "Lucas, I want you to meet someone," John said, with a smile that lit up his face. "This is Emma, my daughter, and these are Michael, Sophie, and Leo." Lucas looked at them, shy at first, but soon felt at ease with John's welcoming family. Emma knelt before him, her gaze gentle. "Hi, Lucas. I've heard so much about you. I'm so happy to finally meet you." The house filled with laughter and conversation, and for the first time in a long time, John felt he was no longer alone. Fate had brought his daughter back, and with her, a new hope and renewed love that united everyone present even more. The morning was clear and bright when John and Lucas gathered in the living room, Emma's family around them. The decision hanging in the air was monumental, but everyone knew that love and unity would prevail. Emma, holding her father's hand, looked into his eyes. "Dad, we want you to come live with us. There's space and a lot of love waiting for you. The kids would love to have their grandfather close." John, with a heart full of gratitude, smiled. "I'd love to, Emma, but only if Lucas agrees." Lucas, feeling the intensity of the moment, took a deep breath. He looked at John, who had been his safe harbor, and at his biological parents, who had risked everything for him. I want to go live with my parents, but Dad, I want you to always be around." David and Clara approached, enveloping Lucas in a hug. "We understand, dear. It will be a big change, but we'll be together." The decision was made, and with a heart mixed with hope and apprehension, Lucas said goodbye to the house he knew and moved to the new home with David and Clara. The adaptation was difficult at first. Lucas missed the familiar routine with John, the comfort of the old house, and the stories John told at night. The first days at the new school were challenging. The children were curious and sometimes cruel, asking questions about his story that he was still trying to understand. Lucas faced loneliness, fear of the unknown, and longing for the old guard who had raised him. But day by day, Lucas began to find his place. Clara got involved in the school, helping him integrate. David spent hours with him, teaching new things, creating the bond he always dreamed of. And the frequent visits from John, now living with Emma, brought comfort and happiness. Lucas discovered a passion for sports, especially soccer. At first, he was clumsy, but with persistence and training, he began to stand out. His parents supported him at every game, every practice, encouraging him to do his best. Gradually, Lucas not only adapted but also began to thrive. He made friends, earned respect, and excelled not only in sports but also in academics. The school recognized his effort and dedication, and he became an example of overcoming. John, following every step of Lucas, felt immense pride. Living with Emma, he reconnected with his family, found peace and joy he hadn't felt in years. The nighttime stories continued, but now they were shared with his grandchildren, who adored him. Lucas, as he entered adolescence, not only overcame difficulties but also stood out in all areas he got involved in. He won a scholarship to a renowned school, his soccer skills recognized by scouts. On the day of the school graduation, the family gathered to celebrate. John, Emma, Michael, David, Clara, Sophie, and Leo were all present, their hearts full of pride and love. Lucas, upon receiving his diploma, looked at everyone who had supported him, his eyes shining with gratitude. In his graduation speech, he said, "I am living proof that with love and support we can overcome any obstacle. I thank each one of you, especially my father John, who rescued me and loved me unconditionally, and my parents David and Clara, who risked everything for me. This success belongs to all of us." Applauded standing, Lucas smiled, knowing that the future was bright. He was ready to face new challenges, knowing that no matter where he was, the love and support of his family would always be with him. The sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of gold and purple, as Lucas walked through the park, his steps light and confident. Beside him, John walked with a cane, time leaving its marks, but his spirit still vibrant. They stopped at a bench, sitting down to appreciate the lake view. Lucas and John's families often met, and today was one of those special days. In a corner of the park, David and Clara chatted animatedly with Emma and Michael, while Sophie and Leo played with the friends Lucas had made over the years. "Have you decided which university you'll go to, Lucas?" John asked, the curiosity and pride evident in his voice. Lucas smiled, looking at the horizon. "Yes. I received an offer to play soccer and study engineering at the university I always dreamed of. But no matter where I go, I'll always come home to you all." John felt a solitary tear slide down his face. He held Lucas's hand, squeezing it tenderly. "I'm so proud of you, my boy. You've achieved so much, and I know you'll keep shining." As the sun slowly hid, Clara approached with a smile. "John, David wants to know if you accept a chess challenge." She cast a playful glance at her husband, who waited eagerly beside the board set up on the grass. John laughed, shaking his head. "He never gives up, does he?" "Sure, let's go." As John stood up, Lucas helped him, ensuring he was steady. They walked together to the chessboard, where David was already positioned. The families gathered around, the friendly competition bringing laughter and jokes. The connection between everyone was evident. They were not just two distinct families, they were one, united by love and shared experiences. The stories and memories created over the years had cemented an unbreakable bond between them. On weekends, they gathered for barbecues, games, and celebrations. The children played together while the adults shared stories and advice. The love between John and Lucas was the foundation, but the bond had expanded, enveloping everyone in a network of support and friendship. Lucas excelled in soccer, his skills recognized by coaches and players. The future seemed promising for him, and he faced it with the certainty that he was surrounded by love and support. The seasons continued to change, but one thing remained constant: the love that united them. And as the sun set on that special day, Lucas knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, he would always have his family by his side. And that certainty made everything possible. Lucas stood out in football, his skills recognized by renowned coaches and players. But he never forgot his roots. Whenever he had a break from training and studies, he returned home, where he found comfort and wisdom in John's advice and the warm hugs of Clara and David. John, in turn, found a new life alongside Emma and her family. He became the loving grandfather he had always wanted to be, actively participating in the lives of his grandchildren, Sophie and Leo. Sunday lunches were a sacred ritual where everyone gathered to share laughs, stories, and unwavering love. At one of these lunches, when Lucas was about to leave for university, he stood up, raising a glass and a toast. "To all of you, my family. Thank you for teaching me the true meaning of love and perseverance. I promise to honor each of you in everything I do." Everyone's eyes were shining, emotions running high. John, with a choked voice, added, "We love you, Lucas, and we will always be here, cheering for you, wherever you are." Lucas hugged John tightly, feeling the warmth and support that had always guided him. Life had been generous in many ways, but the greatest gift of all was that eternal bond that united their souls. And so, the families, united by fate and love, continued to grow and flourish together. The bonds they had formed were stronger than any adversity, and the certainty that they would always have each other turned every day into a continuous celebration of life and eternal love. If you enjoyed this incredible story, subscribe to our channel and activate notifications so you don't miss any upcoming videos. If you love emotional chronicles and want to support our channel to continue bringing more quality content, consider contributing through Buy Me a Coffee. The link is in the first pinned comment. Your help is essential for us to keep improving. Thank you for your support. Until the next exciting chronicle,